Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenmara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho, and tonight, whenever you happen to be seeing this, I would like to do a little review and give my recommendation or not on Buckland's Book of Spirit Communication. This is written by a Gardenian line witch named Raymond Buckland, obviously where it got its name. This is kind of a fascinating one because I got it because I wanted to learn a little bit more about mediumship and seances and to kind of get an idea of how valid some of that stuff was, because when I first picked this book up many years ago, it was something that I was a little bit skeptical on, even with my particular interests in metaphysics and the occult. It was first written in 1993, and then this particular version was the 2004 version. So I dug into it, and he goes through and he does really well, in my opinion, of breaking things down. He has lots of quotes throughout of different people and what each group means for, or what these people mean for that group. Like in lesson 7, they're talking about talking boards and Ouija boards and things like that. And it's like, there's one lady in here: you will have nothing to fear from evil spirits if you have nothing to fear from yourself, which, not quite agreeing with that one. The first promoter of the Ouija board was William Fuld. I'm not a spiritualist, I'm a Presbyterian. I built this in a factory on a Ouija's advice, and I haven't consulted a board since. These things have been moving so well, I didn't want to start anything. So it's one of those deals where he tries to find information to tie into the subject at hand. He goes through basics of what is mediumship, different things from beginning exercises, the concepts of channeling, possession, trance, different exercises to help you raise your vibration. And this is one thing that I do really like about this book. I've only read one other book that does this, or one other series of books, I should say. He gives an examination, so you can actually go through in the physical copy and answer the questions based off of what you were reading. So it's not just a book of information of this is what these mean. It also is giving you historical stuff. It's giving you exercises, some do's and don'ts, ways to stay a little more careful, because unlike, there are some people out there, we call them fluffy bunnies, who don't want to admit that there's dark stuff in the world too. There really is, and that's the stuff that you kind of need to be aware of if you start to work with mediumship or channeling or any of that spirit guide type work. But he goes through two different sections of the history of spiritualism. The first part is the early years, which is like the Fox sisters, Andrew Jackson Davis, etc. Then you go into the history in part 2, which gets into what, like, the spiritualistic church, which I've mentioned in a few of my previous videos, and it talks about a lot of the things that have brought it into the modern day from the 1840s. He goes into spirit guides, ways to work with meditation, how to connect with your spirit guides. There's a section on spirit communication and talking boards, 2 different chapters. Spirit communication is kind of fascinating in a lot of ways, because it's not just simply hearing a voice or channeling a spirit. Sometimes it's something stands out on a shelf for you, or you're walking by your bookshelf and a book falls out and has mysteriously opened to the exact page that you needed an answer to. So there's a lot of different ways to do spirit communication. He talks about talking boards, and I'm, from a personal perspective, and I've said this before and I'll repeat it again, not a fan of talking boards, for the simple fact is they are built to be open windows, open doors. There is not a lot of controls that are built into them, so unless you really truly know what you're doing and how to deal with them, I don't recommend it. And even with that, I know a lot of people in the spiritual community that would be like no, because they're sketchy at best. There is a section of automatic writing and spirit photography, which, that one, when I first picked up the book, I'd never even heard of spirit photography, and I just closed the page. And that is something that is really flippin' cool, and it's not as easy as you might think, because it takes a lot of focus and care from the spiritualist to be able to do, but they have pictures of demonstrations of spirit photography. And there'll be people in the comment section, I already hear them, saying, well, that could just be an overlaid or a double exposed picture. It can, except for it's still happening today. So it's a little more difficult in some ways. Now, with all the photoshopping, it makes it way easier, and AI and all their nonsense. But back in the day, unless you were really super skilled at some of that stuff, it wasn't as easy to do. But it tells you how to build that vibration with your machinery to be able to do that. Talks about we're going into trances, spontaneous versus focused versus sitting yourself down and going into them. Spontaneous trances are basically when you're doing a reading, you're working on energy with somebody, and all of a sudden you click into that other state and a spirit starts working through you. It's a little intense, but that's why they talk about the protection parts as well. Spirit sights and sounds, which is all of your clairs, being able to clear see, clear hear and sense, scrying, crystal gazing, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and then you go through 10 lessons that you can work through. This is one that's kind of fun when you start to get into it a little bit more, which is psychometry. And that's where you can pick up something and talk to it, hold it. What are you getting? What kind of images? What kind of thoughts, vibrations, things like that? And so when you start getting into that, that's why when you go to antique stores, there are people that you'll see that will almost touch stuff because you almost pick it up on them that they're like, oh, you're actually seeing what's attached to that. But it's kind of interesting because you can find out a lot of information like that if that's your particular gift as a natural's gift. Some of them you have to train. There's physical mediumship, which is where you bring in a spirit, and that also gets into ectoplasm, having the spirit show up above the table. Some of the more popular versions of that were like back in Charmed and some of those movies. The ectoplasm was really made good in horror films like A Haunting in Connecticut, things like that. So it seems, that never happened. Back in the day, some of that stuff was a lot more real than you'd like to admit. There were ways of testing these people where they would literally get completely nude, check all their orifices, I'm literally meaning all of them, to make sure that they weren't hiding stuff. But like this picture here, the dude on the side, if I can do this without dropping it, this guy, that white line right there, that's ectoplasm. And there are still people today who claim to have that. I personally have never been in a situation where ectoplasm has appeared. Does it mean it doesn't exist? No. It just means that I personally have never experienced that. There's table tipping and levitation, and this is where you get into kind of the charlatan aspect of it, where he actually calls out the charlatans, where you'll see people who can do it this way. There was a time in both the United States and in European history, and I talk about that a little bit in my Fox Sisters one on occult and crochet, where they would literally have these people stripped completely nude, check all their orifices. The doctor, who is a skeptic, who did the full examination, might drape a sheet over them, or like a veil of some form, to protect some modesty. I'm not sure what you're doing with a lacy veil, but okay. And then have them do their readings at that point, and they would still have tables that would levitate to the ceiling. Ectoplasm would show up. Spirits would just show up out of nowhere and talk. There is something to this. It's just people have been taught for so many years that it's not real. So he gets into a section on healing, and then we're talking about like Edgar Cayce and the different chakra energies, the different kinds of energy healing, including Reiki, the layers of light, and it helps train you to be more sensitive. This particular book is something you can do on your own or with just one friend, so it's not like you have to have a gigantic coven or anything to work with. You can do a lot of this stuff by practicing through here. He has a full section on channeling and the difference between channeling and mediumship, And yes, there is a difference. And then it talks about channeled messages versus inspired messages. And that's something that definitely is worth a go over if you're looking at some of these modern works, because a full channeler or a medium is someone like Esther Hicks. She brings in Abraham and he fully sits inside, or they fully sit inside her. But an inspired message is someone who takes a verse and gets inspiration and writes from it, or sees something and is inspired to expound upon it. Big difference in the occult world. Channeling and mediumship, you're dealing with things that are either coming in or surrounding you, which sounds scary, but it's not if you do it right. But inspired is basically like your friend is sitting across the room whispering to you, so it's not as intensive. And then he goes into development and developing circles, and this is ways to kind of build a little spiritual group where you guys work together and kind of support each other. He goes into, and this was added into this edition because it wasn't in the 93 that I remember, but in the 2004 he talks about electronic spiritual contact, and that's modern tools of communication using EVPs and slates, laptops. Not sure what ITC stands for. Let's look. But it's really a fun book because it's not just, here, read about it. It also has lots and lots and lots of exercises. It's got questions that you can answer, things you can think about. ITC is instrumental transcommunication. That's where, like, ghostwriting, literally, not like ghostwriting as I dictated my book to someone else and they ghostwrote it for me. It was sitting down at a computer and meditating with the screen open, and typewriters used to do this too, where the ghost, the spirit, would actually answer your questions without you physically touching the machine or the computer. And this particular section, and I have to show you this because it makes me giggle, they have an old school Commodore 64 style computer as their demonstration. So it's very much a dated thing, but it's a lot of fun to go through. And then he, like I said, he has a section in here on, where'd it go? Fraudulent practices. He talks about different laws in England that they switched out the Witchcraft Act for the Fraudulent Medium Act. He goes through all of that, which was in June of 1951. Then he talks about how spiritualists can be frauds, not all of them, but you cold readers and stuff like that. The materialization, trumpet sounding, levitating tables, banging of tambourines, how they do it with different tools hidden up sleeves and things like that. Declaration of Principles. This is the National Spiritualist Association. It's loosely tied to the Spiritualist Church. They have a very specific declaration of how to do this and how to be ethical about it. And he goes through all of that, which is actually nice. There is the Social Policy Statement of the National Spiritual Association of Churches, which is a little bit more defined aspect of that. Gives you the answers to the exam questions. Some of them are things that you answer for yourself. Then there's other section where it's like testing if you actually were paying attention when you were reading, which, like I said, is kind of fun. I didn't answer any questions in the book. I did all of mine in my journals, which are a little extensive right now. But if you really want to get a little bit more information on spirit communication, channeling, mediumship, crystal balls, all that kind of stuff, it's not a very thick book. It's like 200 pages or something, 250 pages. It is definitely worth picking up if it's something that you're interested in. Like I said, there's a lot of exercises in each chapter, so it's not something you're just going to read. You're going to read the section, and if it's something that you're drawn to or you're inspired by, there are exercises on how to develop that. Now, are you going to do it overnight? Probably not. If it's a natural talent, that's a little different. But in most cases, it's one of those things where you're going to practice this for weeks, sometimes months, if not a full year, before it becomes comfortable where it just starts happening. Things like automatic writing. It took a little bit for me to trigger that. Once I did, I'm a lefty when I automatic write. I do not write well with my right hand. I don't, they do. But automatic writing is something that you may find that you do really well with one hand and not the other. Some people can do it with both. It's all a matter of getting into that state. I do not personally open a channel. I do not like to do channeling. I will allow energies when I'm in the right reading state to like do the surrounding thing where you can absorb the information, but they're not coming in. That's where I draw the line. But that's a personal thing for me. Other people are more than comfortable with full channeling, and that's great. But again, if you're interested in this book, it'll be linked in the description. It's really fascinating. I like the fact that he puts in the back of it how to detect a genuine fraud versus someone who might be an amateur versus someone who is actually really well trained, or sometimes it's natural talent that pops up and people don't even realize what they're doing because it's second nature to them. So with that, let me know your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in the comments down below. Have you read Buckland's Book of Spirit Communication, or have you tried any of the techniques I talked about here quickly? Like I said, it's kind of a book review giving you an idea of what this book actually holds, and it's kind of fun. There's another thing about this that is interesting, is they give mini biographies. There's a section after each test. Here's your test. And then they go into mini biography, which there's one like Edgar Cayce, there's ones on the Fox sisters, Emanuel Swedenborg. So you can get an idea of the people who helped either develop that particular branch or people who are inspirational within the group. So with that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your day. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts if you've ever used this book or if you've read it or the techniques. With that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next video.